Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee, members of the partnership and supporting physically in the room and online. Can I remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Meeting chat should only be used for messages about speaking or technical issues, no private discussions. But please do use the raise hand function if you wish to speak. That's both physically and remotely. I would encourage everyone to ensure that their microphones are off or that they are fully muted and they're speaking. And when speaking, can you please give your name and your organisation? If we can move on to item 1 of the agenda, is apologies for absence, declarations of interest. I believe we're all here, so I don't think there are any apologies. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? I'd be quite surprised if they get the agenda. We have a guest with us online today, Councillor Mary Temperton, who's the leader of Bracknell Forest Council and the chair of the Berkshire Prosperity Board. And we're also joined by Susan Halliwell, who's the chief executive of Bracknell Forest. Councillor Temperton, would you like to say a few words?
I was just going to say, I think we should be able to hear Mary now. Would you
like to say testing, 1, 2, 3?
Can you hear me now? Everybody, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, I am really sorry I'm not there with you. I really intended to, but I've woken up with the most awful head cold. So for the benefit of you all, but particularly Sue Halliwell, who would have driven me there, it's best I sit here and do it online. Yeah. I really am looking forward to this meeting, and thank you for inviting me. I think the meeting we had in Bracknell was really, really successful. I think we achieved a lot going for the governance and looking at how we can ask the of our demands of what we want from the government to make sure that the Mayor's Strategic Authority is a success. And I'm sure we can all work on this so that we can benefit. It's a benefit to us all, and it's quite exciting. And thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to the meeting.
Thanks, Mary. And look forward to your contributions as the afternoon goes on. Item 3, public participation. So we have 3 submissions from the public. The first one is the Oxfordshire Roads Action Alliance. Kevin, I believe you've had if you'd like to read it out.
Thank you, Chair. So this is in relation to item 6, the Oxfordshire Infrastructure Strategy. And I'm just quoting verbatim from what they've submitted. The refresh paper credits the Oxfordshire Infrastructure Strategy as successful in helping secure the Oxfordshire Housing and Growth Deal and Housing Infrastructure Fund bids. OXIS, the acronym, is a ranking of infrastructure projects across the county along with their funding deficits, and is used by the County Council in its funding applications to demonstrate a strategic approach to supporting planned growth. Oxfordshire Roads Action Alliance has supported communities in South Oxfordshire and Vale of White Horse affected by road schemes funded in part by the HIF1 bid and the Growth Deal. His Majesty's Government stated that the HIF1 and Housing and Growth Deal bids did not alter statutory functions, duties and rights of local planning authorities to plan for growth. OXIS includes growth that is not identified in the latest emerging local plans or their associated infrastructure delivery plans. Should OXIS be updated to rank only unfunded infrastructure for growth in the most up-to-date plans? The report acknowledges public opposition to expenditure on road expansion schemes that support out-of-date policies, do not contribute directly to the achievement of net zero, and that face multiple objections. OXIS refers to improving sustainable transport provision and managing demand is prioritised over capacity on the SRN, which I think is Strategic Road Network. For the local network, Oxis says the local transport and connectivity plan emphasises the need to reduce reliance on road schemes, and this is a quotation from the plan, I believe. In some cases, new roads or widening roads and junctions may be necessary to ensure a reliable and effective transport network. Anyway, Oxis admits LTCP policy 36A that, again quoting, road capacity schemes must only be considered after all other options have been explored. This is not a sustainable long-term solution because we have found that road schemes often generate new demand and quickly reach capacity again. End quote. National Highways is responsible and accountable for the strategic road network, including the A34/M40 through Oxfordshire and any associated impacts. Any other new or existing roads would be for Oxfordshire County Council, and any traffic and its associated impacts as a result of attracting trips from the strategic road network or adding capacity on local roads for traffic would be a matter for Oxfordshire County Council. Oxfordshire Roads Action Alliance contests that the LTCP supports the public purse funding roads capacity schemes in lots of circumstances. This undermines the core aim of the LTCP. Has Oxis provided a realistic or accurate estimate of funding shortfalls for infrastructure schemes? If not, how can projects' cost estimates be more accurate? The County Council, in bidding to deliver scheme, takes all the financial risk of cost overruns. This is a major concern often expressed by communities to the Roads Alliance. The Housing and Growth deal included £150 million housing from infrastructure programme to accelerate planned homes. There was an expectation the county would recoup forward finances of schemes from developer contributions. There were instances when the county had no legal mechanism to request retrospective contributions as expected. Question: what lessons have been learned, and will there be a report explaining what actions the county has taken? And final paragraph: ORA is a community alliance and campaign group opposed to unsustainable road development in Oxfordshire. We would welcome inclusion in the second round of consultation intended for a wide audience in January to February 2026.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm not proposing we give a direct answer to that, but directors and members take that into account when we come to the Oxis item on the agenda. Does that seem like a reasonable approach? Our second submission is from Councillor Roger Parker of Sherburn Parish Council, also regarding agenda item 6 on Oxis and specifically the Watlington Relief Road. Have you had enough chance to recover your...
Thank you. Sherburn Parish has reviewed the Oxfordshire Infrastructure Strategy Refresh report and requests that the Watlington Relief Road is removed during stage 2 merit-based evaluation. Stage 2 is to be considered on or in January to February 2026. The stage 1 refresh, including the Watlington Relief Road, number 7 in this quote, major transport infrastructure projects in Oxfordshire road infrastructure. Oxis provides a high-level data set of infrastructure requirements. Again, this is a quote, albeit confined to those large, big-ticket strategic infrastructure projects that span or influence a wider area than one district. End quote. These are schemes that it is anticipated will not be funded solely from developer contributions, and that the county would have to bid for funding from the public purse. The increased challenge of value for money and capital investment is recognised by the County Council. Oxfordshire County Council is promoting a relief road at Watlington. The County Council says it is not a strategic transport scheme. It is described as an aspiration in a neighbourhood parish plan and a local scheme. As described by the County Council, the Waddington Relief Road does not qualify as a strategic transport and does not meet a value for money test for bids to central government. It should be removed from Oxis. Oxfordshire County Council's local transport and activity plan has a number of key targets to reduce car use, increase public transport and active travel, and improve road safety. It is noticed that the Waddington Relief Road is included in Oxis solely as a road capacity scheme. It would not contribute to any of the key targets for integrated transport schemes and does not contribute directly to net zero. Oxis provides a ranking of the road network in Oxfordshire, consisting of the strategic road network, SRN, made up of motorways and trunk A roads. Non-trunk roads are the roads on the local authority network, which are the responsibility of the County Council as the local highways authority. Some A roads managed by the local authority form part of the major road network. The major road network comprises the county's busiest and most economically important local authority, A roads, the countries. It is noticed that a Waddington Relief Road is only road capacity scheme in Oxis that is in an area of minor B roads. Oxis notes minor roads are often not built to modern standards and in rural areas, making highway maintenance a challenge. This is a further reason to remove the Waddington Relief Road from the Oxis paper. Sherborne Parish supports the work to identify energy, water stress and quality, green infrastructure and health infrastructure.
Thank you. And given that that deals with the same item, again, I think it's best if officers members take that into consideration when we come to discuss the Oxis item. And our final public contribution is Ian Green from Oxford Civic Society, who wants to talk about the timetable for local government reorganisation. Mr. Green, are you there online?
Yes, I am. Yes.
And let's see. Fire away.
Thank you very
before, so you know the form. So.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm talking about local government reorganisation. In July of this year, I first mentioned to this group, the Oxfordshire Leaders Committee, that this civic society is inviting parish, town and city and district councillors, special interest groups, community organisations, businesses and individuals from across the county to collaborate on a politically neutral local assessment of how each proposal for local government reorganisation could improve the efficiency and effectiveness of public services across the county and the socio-economic development planning of the county. This assessment is going well. Additionally, the Society will host a discussion with proposers of the three proposals from Oxfordshire on the merits and risks associated with each proposal. This discussion is now fixed for November the 1st. This is a Saturday morning, and we are inviting parish, town and city and district councillors, special interest groups, community organisations, businesses and individuals. And the speakers are confirmed, and they include, I'm very happy to say, councillors Leffman and Brown, who have confirmed that they will be able to join the meeting on November the 1st. The Oxford location of the meeting will be confirmed in the next couple of days, and we will be circulating the details. But to all those interested who are on this call, please do make a note of the date. November the 1st, it's a Saturday morning meeting, and it's most likely to be in the Mathematical Institute, but we haven't quite finished our discussions with them yet to confirm the place. Most likely the Mathematical Institute. I stress, as I am from this Oxford Civic Society, I feel I must stress that this is not an Oxford-centric initiative. For the last 11 years, Oxford Civic Society has had an Oxfordshire Futures working group, which has been actively engaged in county-wide transport, infrastructure, economic and inclusivity issues. And of course, we did a lot of work with you on the ill-fated Oxfordshire 2050 plan. Our interest is in assessing what impact, if any, the size and shape of the new unitaries will have on the costs of delivering the services currently provided by local government, and what impact will the size and shape of the new unitaries have on growth performance. And we're giving some emphasis to the latter. A final query: it is, of course, particularly good that the three proposals are built on a common database, and we're asking if we could have access to parts of the database where our own information is lacking. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to the group this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Green. In terms of your request for, I think everyone has noted the date. In terms of your request for data, it will probably be helpful if you could send me what your request for what data it is that you want, because obviously some data is necessarily restricted, and it might not be data that we particularly have to hand. But if you send me a request for what it is that you actually want, then I'll forward it on to the right officer.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Okay. Yeah. We skipped over item 2 on the agenda, which was the minutes. We haven't formally approved them. Is that we should? Yeah. If we could formally agree those minutes, I propose that. General nodding around the room. Yes. Item 4, which is the timetable for local government reorganisation. Mr. Down, you've submitted a report. Would you like to introduce it?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Just a very brief report, just to set out what is known about the timetable for local government reorganisation. It's not an attempt to look at the individual proposals that we have, but just so that there's public clarity on the timetable we're expecting. I suppose the one caveat is that this is information as best we know it from MHCLG, and things could change. But I guess the one thing that won't change, we can be fairly sure about, is the deadline for submission of 28th of November. So just straightforward facts, but very happy to take any questions if there are any.
Gentle suggestion that the government might change its mind. I apologise for that. Does anyone have questions? Councillor Lettman.
It's not so much a question as a comment, Chair, if I may. I have been having conversations with people like Neil Coleman about the fact that we've got a growth commission happening in Oxfordshire. My big concern is that the government is talking about a possible decision around the middle of next year, which is really very late. And I think it's quite difficult for us to justify having a growth commission working on an 18-month framework and having such a big gap between the submission of the proposals on the 28th of November before a decision is taken, because I think it's really important that we have some certainty, particularly here in Oxfordshire, given the effort that the government's making to generate economic growth here. So I have asked various people if they would write to the Minister of State and indeed the Secretary of State to request a quick decision for Oxfordshire. And I know, Mary, that the leaders in Berkshire have said that they would be willing to send a letter to that effect, because it's important also from the point of view of devolution that we're not at the bottom of the queue. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is they go alphabetically and it's right at the bottom of the queue. So I would hope that given the circumstances that we find ourselves in here in Oxfordshire, we could persuade the Secretary of State to make a fast decision. I'm not hopeful, but at least we can make an effort, I think, to make the point in our favour.
Any other questions or comments?
Sorry,
Sorry, Mary.
I'd just like to say that letter's been sent.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Andy.
Just underpinning what Liz has said, really. I think, especially in light of the fact that the Growth Commission sort of timetable for its existence at the moment, in terms of what it's said, is really short, and therefore what can be achieved is going to be lessened by a delay in the decision-making process. And it's no point us actually having these good, useful discussions with Neil Coleman if actually his hand is tied behind his back in terms of being able to implement any of it. So anything we can do as an Oxfordshire leaders group in terms of underpinning the need through a letter or some form of communication, I'd certainly support that.
Else? Clearly, each individual council can make their own things. Was your proposal, Liz, that this group should write asking for?
Yeah, I think it would be really helpful if, as a group, we could make the point to government that we're in the middle of this growth commission, that we've got lots of things going for us here in Oxfordshire. It doesn't matter what the outcome is; we just need to know what the outcome is, so that we can get on with things and develop accordingly.
David, you had there.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. We were happy to support that proposal. I think, regardless of the Growth Commission, it's going to be useful for the government to come to a decision as swiftly as it can. I think obviously it needs to have time to properly analyse the recommendations or the proposals. So we wouldn't want to rush it, but I think, the more time we've got to prepare for the unitary authority, the better, really.
Does anyone else have anything? Does anyone have any objection to? I'll interpret there's a proposal that we draft a letter to go from this group requesting a speedy decision, and that we circulate that draft around for people to comment before it's sent. Caroline.
Well, I was only going to ask the question about the timing of that and whether it might be better to send once we've got the proposals in.
Is it something that we would send with the submission?
Well, given that the Berkshire leaders have already sent a letter, and given that we've also got other people who are willing to send letters to that effect as well, from businesses, etc., around the county, I think the sooner the better. Just to make the point, we are going to be making submissions, but we'd like a quick turnaround so they can organise themselves to do that.
Some of the MPs have been
Speak up.
sorry. I believe some of the MPs have been are wanting to send letters for the same reason. So I think that this should be something separate, written by you as chair, on behalf of this group.
Susan?
I want a quick decision as much as the next person. I'm just not very confident that it's going to do anything, if I'm honest. I don't think it's, I think the government's got a huge task here with the amount of local government reorganisation that it's got to undertake. And you can already see the kind of the priority areas, it's kind of slowing things down a little bit already. So I'm more than happy for us to write and ask for an earliest possible decision, but I'm just trying to manage your disappointment in advance by saying I'm not quite so confident that it's going to have an immediate effect. Sorry.
I'm not holding out my hopes.
I think all of us as council leaders have sat in meetings where there's been a proposal that we write a letter and we've all thought, we wonder where that's going to go. But no harm in trying. So is everyone happy that we draft a letter and we circulate it to everyone for approval before send? I was using the royal we there, it's probably Andrew. But everyone agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else on the timetable? In which case we move on to item 5, which is devolution. And Kim, I believe, is online.
Right.
And can I just check, Paul Cutson, are you online as well? Yes, I can see waving. Is one of you going to introduce this?
Yes, I'll introduce the report, Councillor.
Okay.
So this report is recommending that councils across Oxfordshire move towards devolution for our region, and a similar report is being brought into Berkshire, which is the reason why my counterpart in Berkshire, Paul Patterson, is attending. And the purpose of this really is to get us onto the devolution programme that government has. As you know from various policies that have been introduced by the government, their key objective is to achieve growth across England, well, across the UK, but principally in England, by bringing the devolution to English authorities. They see that as the means to achieve growth. In fact, it's said in the white paper that they want to rewire England to devolve power and money to regions, and they're going to do that. They propose to do that by reforming local government and creating new strategic authorities. And you can see from the various strategic authorities that exist currently in Manchester, Liverpool and the West Midlands that there is some evidence that there are evidence of success there in improving the economic growth of an area through the creation of these new strategic authorities. So the paper sets out that there are 3 different types proposed in the new English devolution bill. Those 3 types, one of them is not available to us yet as an established strategic authority, because as it says, you have to be established. What is available to us is either a foundation or a mayoral strategic authority, but the foundation authority is discounted on the basis that it doesn't really bring sufficient powers, and it is considered that that is only going to be granted in exceptional circumstances to certain authorities who were already on that path pre the devolution white paper. So the question for leaders is whether they would support the mayoral strategic authority in this area, and paragraphs 5 and 6 of the report set out the reasons why you're being recommended to take this further forward as a mayoral strategic authority. So the main reasons are, of course, it brings more powers, more control over funding and greater engagement with government. But what does that really mean? Well, more powers and more funding means it really gives you greater control over, rather than government setting out policy and national objectives, which might not always be suitable for our area. The proposal is that we devolve powers down locally, and you as leaders meet together on a strategic authority board together with the mayor to decide where that money should be spent, on which particular projects which would have the greatest benefit for your area. And that in itself enables you to control the levers of growth that should bring further prosperity to our area. And what isn't spelt out in this paper, but is obviously highly relevant, is that we start from a place of prosperity in our region. Therefore, what we might achieve from creating a mayoral strategic authority, well, who knows, that's for the leaders to decide and be in control of. But clearly we're starting from a particularly already successful position. And therefore the recommendations are then that we take this further forward by first briefing members in your respective councils. Then there will be a process of formal approval, enabling us to then submit a request to the government by the end of this year that would get us onto the devolution programme. Now, there's no guarantees that we would be in the next round of devolution. We can only at this stage put ourselves forward, but we are hoping that we can create a compelling enough case, which you will see as these come for formal approval, that it will make us a pretty irresistible choice, we're hoping, for government. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paul, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just really to reiterate the points that Kim made in terms of the benefits as we move forward on this. And I think the other point to make is that the paper that has been placed on the agenda will also go to Berkshire's Prosperity Board for the same consideration. So we do this in parallel. And I think, this is the start of working very collaboratively together to look at the opportunities that this mayoral strategic authority can bring to the region in terms of scaling up and adding and powering up the region's economy. So, I'll stop at that point.
Thank you. Does anyone, first of all, have any questions for Kim? In which case,
I've got a sort of a general one.
Let's move into general discussion then. Yeah.
It's a question. It's just a general question. So we all know government's not very good at funding local government, and we're all struggling with that, the consequences of that. And then with the fairer funding scheme, and the idea that money is being sort of apportioned to some areas rather than others. Do we have any idea that if the strategic authorities, no matter how amazing and successful we are as a strategic authority, will the fairer funding sort of idea be reflected in the geography of mayoral strategic authorities across the country? That gentleman, boy.
That was complex enough to provoke some furrowed brows.
Yes, it doesn't look good. Sorry.
The effect of fair funding review on
the
mayoral
gist of the
strategic
fair
authorities.
funding, yes.
Do we know how or if that is likely to impact?
Yeah.
So I don't have a direct answer for that, because so far the fair funding review is targeted at existing levels of local government, not strategic authorities. However, what I will say about funding is that what essentially what the devolution of powers is about is to give you more control over funding that is currently being spent up in central government, and so, for example, you'll have much greater control over how you may want perhaps to spend transport funding in your region and directing it to projects that you think have more value. There is also, there's talk of increasing, for example, rail powers for government and giving the mayoral strategic authorities more control over how and planning the future of the rail network. And you're just about to hear about a rail report here at this board. So it's essentially more so about being able to take funding that already exists, but tailor it and bespoke it to your particular area. There are some additional areas where there's incentive funding. For example, the Local Innovations Partnership Fund recently announced there was at least £30 million available to each combined authority, and that was given to them automatically, whereas all other local authorities had to bid in for similar funding, but the maximum pot there was £20, and you're in competitive bids against lots of other local authorities. So it's not essentially about whether massive tranches of additional funding are going to come your way, but it's about giving you more control over the funding that is available in government so that you can decide how you wish to spend that locally.
Thanks. I think you meant to say 20 million rather than £20. That really would be Rachel.
That's fair.
And so for those online, Martin Rees from Oxfordshire, I think, yeah, I'm glad you're not being pedantic, but I know Treasury and fiscal headroom is pretty low at the moment, but I think there's more than 20 quid going on it. But I think just to add to that, it's absolutely right. I understand Councillor Thompson's question. I think as us, and certainly with colleagues here from Berkshire, the reality is that any strategic authority you wish to support going forward will not, quite frankly, be funded either in setup or over the first mayoral term in the same way as the established authorities had been. I know we've had this discussion, but it's really important for the record that my view, I think our view as officers, it simply will not be the traditional revenue gain, which in effect is a commitment from Treasury. Let's pick a number because it's elsewhere, £40 million over 30 or 40 years, which gives you aggregate. You can borrow against it. It's highly unlikely that will be in play, which is why I think our differential for the Thames Valley in those bits of the geography that are currently collaborating is we don't have to necessarily engage in a ridiculous conversation about give us loads up front. But what we do have to do, which I think is Councillor Thompson's point, is understand our pool environment on massive potential revenue and capital around infrastructure, skills, growth enabling infrastructure, which at the moment will be more likely linked to per capita output, but could be an interesting conversation about balance of rurality, deprivation communities. And I think that could be an interesting conversation. I think if we're able to move to the next step, if you're supporting this paper and we get into even more detailed conversations, that's exactly the kind of financial funding discussion that we should be having with government. And I would say this, even if others are looking at us from across the country with you as joint leaders, there are virtually no other places in the country that can enter that kind of conversation. I say there's simply, in terms of economic output, vitality, business growth potential, and impact net into the exchequer, there's very few others that can enter that conversation, which suggests to me we should be at the front of the queue if you're politically supportive of it. But it will not be a traditional funding mechanism. And I think we've got to have our eyes wide open with that as well.
you listen to us all to exhibit vitality during the rest of this meeting.
And our sandwiches.
Andy.
Yeah, just on the back of what Martin has just said, really. I mean, I kind of look forward to the challenge on this one, because I think really as leaders, we have more control in our hands than we think. I mean, we always look to governments and say, well, whatever you give us, we'll end up actually making a good job of it. And I think that's just about, you know, the good governance and the good way that we as local authorities take our job seriously in terms of ensuring, and I think this is the key, is that our communities get best value out of that process. And I will just put on record really that my view going forward is the sum of the parts actually is really, and the greater sum of the parts, I will put that word in as well, is gives us that much more muscle power in order to actually address the issues over this Thames Valley area, which really have to be addressed, in my view, both morally, ethically, and in going forward, if we are going to actually achieve best value going forward. And in terms of development of local government, we are committed on a path. We are not coming off that path. If it comes off, it's due to things that are totally out of our control. So let's make sure we do take control of it, and let's actually work together in the way that we have now actually got on that road to ensure we do put our case forward to government as soon as possible.
So we have discussed devolution amongst ourselves and with Berkshire leaders quite a lot over the last few months. I can put you to the recommendations, which are that we note the contents of the report and commit to bringing them to following leaders summit. That we note the work that is being undertaken, and that we're going to take it through our own governance structures, and subject to that we support the submission to join the devolution programme. Is everyone, if I propose that, can I have a seconder, Councillor Brown, and is everyone happy with those recommendations? Yeah. Okay, thank you, and thank you those online. We move on to item 6 rather, which is Oxis, and Paul Staines is here to give us an introduction, and I believe online, can we just check that Matthew Pell from Acon is online?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, and we can see you now. Thank you. Over to you, Paul.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Yes, so as my badge says, I'm Paul Staines. I'm the programme manager for your committee and the current lead officer to take forward this project. Listening to the previous conversations about how we progress down the evolution of local government organisation journey reminds me that the data set that we will require to have the richer conversations will lean upon work such as Oxis to enable it to be a richer conversation. So I think this is an important project for us to take forward. So it's timely that we bring a report to mark the completion of stage 1 of this project to you. And stage 1 of the project is where we now have, hopefully, a complete and comprehensive data set, which we will then take forward into the assessment process, which will be the nub of stage 2. Both of these stages of the project are being taken forward on our behalf by Acon, who join us, as you say, Chair, this afternoon. And at the risk of in trying to make sure that there's not too much repetition here, I'll probably close at that point, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, Matthew, is there anything you'd like to say as an introduction? Or
Yeah, I mean, well,
you have a presentation.
I do have a presentation. Can I share my screen? Does that work?
Okay, good to go.
Can you see that?
Just, I mean,
yep.
You got that?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Okay. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. As Paul said, we are working with Paul on behalf of the OLJC to produce the Oxis. My name's Matthew Pell. I'm a town planning director from the firm AECOM, and I'm leading the team who've been commissioned to produce that work. I'm going to do a quick summary of this stage 1 work. It shouldn't be more than 10 minutes. And we obviously don't have time to delve into all that detail and data that sits behind this, but I understand that Paul's included a link to our work in your agenda pack, so you can look at that in more detail in due course. So firstly, I want to remind you of the objectives of our commission. So the strategy will provide a comprehensive understanding of the strategic infrastructure that's required to support growth and development up to 2050 across the county. It will function as a statement and evidence base of ambition for sustainable development. It will be a key investment document that Oxfordshire can use to engage with government, infrastructure providers, and the business community. And it will provide an accessible vehicle for engagement with the community and wider partners. And it will inform and be informed by parallel plans, strategies, and initiatives across Oxfordshire. And as illustrated there on the slide, this is the 3rd iteration of Oxis, following the first in 2017 and then the last piece of work that was done in 2021. So Oxis has a clearly defined scope. Geographically, it covers the 5 local authorities, the county across Oxfordshire, but also considers adjoining sub-regional areas. Has a phased time frame, considering both the short term to 2030, the medium term to 2040, which broadly aligns with the local plan period, and then longer term into 2050. The scope is wide. You can see that by the illustration on the slide there, but it's focused on strategic scale infrastructure, which is defined here as critical systems, facilities, and services that enable long-term sustainable growth development across a larger than local area. And we've been asked specifically to address gaps in knowledge from previous Oxis work, particularly in the areas of strategic health, energy, water systems, and green and blue infrastructure. Paul just picked up on this in terms of our approach is coming forward in 2 stages. The first stage is now complete. We started back in January. This has covered the compilation and the review of relevant evidence and data. We've agreed a set of growth scenarios with the working group. We've undertaken infrastructure topic-based analysis of supply and infrastructure and demand. We've undertaken technical stakeholder engagement, and we've drafted an infrastructure project list or pipeline with mapping and costs. Our stage 1 published for stakeholder consultation in August. So now we're in stage 2, which will run until early next year, and will consist of us updating our stage 1 work based on the feedback from our consultation, undertaking a review of potential funding options, and the sifting of the current project long list to a manageable shorter list, and then agreeing a appropriate prioritization framework to be applied to that project list. That's the focus for our current activity with the project working group. It's also important to highlight our work's not happening in a silo. It's very much informed by and will inform a number of key work streams and plans. This includes the council's local plans, the county-wide local nature recovery strategy, the local area energy plan, the 2040 rail strategy, and the 100 Together Green Infrastructure Initiative. The outcomes of our work and the parallel strategies that are on the screen here are all of particular interest to the Oxfordshire or Oxford Growth Commission, as you've been talking about earlier. Just providing a simple summary overview of the work completed to date, which includes the stage 1 strategy document, the infrastructure project list or schedule, an interactive online project map, and then an online virtual consultation room where we've displayed these outputs. And we've been able to receive feedback from technical stakeholders to help validate the stage 1 work, but also gather more inputs into stage 2 of the project. So some of the actual content of stage 1, firstly, the growth context. We've worked closely with the local authorities as part of the working group to establish a set of housing, economic and demographic assumptions for the strategy. We've agreed housing growth scenarios which go beyond the plan period up to 2050, and we've done that by rolling forward the local plan numbers plus the application of future housing need from the government's methodology for that. So we had 3 scenarios developed through that process. As illustrated here, the highest growth scenario considered suggests an increase of 135,000 additional homes across the county by 2050. And then linked to that, we work with the county council on forecasting what the population change would be associated with that, using their existing demographic models. And that suggested an increase in population of about 250,000 people over that same time frame. We've also incorporated existing economic data and forecasts previously commissioned by the local authorities, which forecast on a business as usual scenario an increase in jobs of over 100,000 jobs over that period. You can also see an example of our mapping here, which collects all the existing and planned housing and economic development sites across the county, and that allows us to understand the scale, location, the timing of growth, which can then be considered alongside the existing and planned infrastructure projects. The stage 1 strategy includes a comprehensive baseline of technical assessment across all those 6 infrastructure areas and the related subtopics. The assessment has 4 main aspects to it. The first is considering who the bodies are who plan and deliver those infrastructure items and any key changes in the direction of travel as part of their strategies or government policies. The second is an analysis of the existing infrastructure capacity based on the evidence-based reviewed, focusing on key constraints, opportunities, and so on. And then the third part is estimating what the strategic infrastructure needs are to support growth to 2050. And that's either by being informed by the service providers themselves or through estimating that through our own assessments or modelling. And then finally, establishing the existing pipeline of infrastructure planned for that infrastructure service. And that helps us to thereby understand the gaps in planned provision. As part of the stage 1 work, we've compiled a draft infrastructure project list or schedule, and that provides a working list of all the strategic projects identified as needed to support housing and economic growth to 2050. At this stage, not all the infrastructure topics have a comprehensive set of projects planned to support that growth to 2050, unsurprisingly. And so for the purpose of what we're doing, we've applied theoretical modelling, demand analysis based on the growth scenarios and the use of benchmarks to help indicate the potential scale of infrastructure investment required. And then our stakeholder engagement and stakeholders themselves are able to interrogate what we've come up with in the project schedule itself, and they can look at detail that's included within that schedule, which includes information on each of the projects, what it is, where it is, what the spatial impact is, what the status of the project is, what the timescales, costs, funding, delivery partners might be, and so on. So there's a total of 377 projects at the moment in that project list, with a predominance in transport-related projects, unsurprisingly, but also a significant number of green infrastructure and energy utility projects. The majority of the projects are associated with specific local authority areas, as opposed to county-wide, with the most projects recorded in Oxford City and Cherwell. There are also a significant number of Oxfordshire scale-wide projects which address issues across multiple authorities. And there's also a number of what we're calling larger than local projects, which relate to sub-regional or nationally significant projects. So the stage 1 research and project list is, it's almost 400 projects, but the stage 1 strategy has also highlighted a smaller number of kind of major strategic projects for each of the infrastructure topics. And these have been illustrated through our mapping platform, which you can see there. And I'm not going to try and read out all of these projects to you, but just to give you some examples under the transport list there, there's East West Rail, there's the M40 Junction 10 upgrades, there's Oxford Station further enhancements, additional new rail stations, numerous bus and rapid transit schemes, active travel networks, and so on. Under utilities, there's upgrades to grid supply points at Cowley and East Claydon. Underwater, there's the Oxford Flood Alleviation Scheme and the Abingdon Reservoir Scheme. For green infrastructure, there's the Oxfordshire Nature Recovery Fund. On social infrastructure, university expansion plans and numerous new secondary and special schools. And on healthcare, various hospital expansion plans and new mental health care provision. It's important, though, just linking back to one of the questions you had earlier on, it's important to stress that the list of schemes will be further scrutinised in stage 2 through a sifting process and a prioritisation framework. So inclusion on this list of major schemes does not indicate a preference or a prioritisation for Oxford at this stage. I also wanted to show you the outcomes in terms of the kind of financial implications of that. So the stage 1 project schedule recorded costs where that was known or possible. So of the 377 projects, around 40% of them had specific project costs already available. So therefore, we had to undertake additional modelling, benchmarking to provide further cost estimates to the projects with no costs to help us to get that fuller picture, which again is going to be refined through stage 2. And so that analysis suggested a total infrastructure cost of around £9 billion to support growth to 2050 across all the infrastructure topics. Again, it's important to note that the costs here are currently skewed towards transport and water supply investment, again, due to the inclusion of some of those major projects I just mentioned on the previous slides, such as the East West Rail and the Abingdon Reservoir, which account for large amounts of those project costs. There's also notable amounts for acute and social healthcare recorded as well. Alongside the project costs, information regarding secured or likely funding was also recorded for each project. And that information, again, is not comprehensive at this stage, so the figure presented here should be treated with caution. It will be higher than that, we would hope. Our stage 2 work will review that in more detail and consider further potential funding sources, including direct funding by service providers, other government funding pots, and the impact of developer contributions. And then just to finish off by giving a quick overview of the engagement work we've undertaken for stage 1. In April, we undertook technical workshops, which were focused on each of the infrastructure topic areas. We invited key organisations relevant to the planning and delivery of these services, and this was then followed by a number of meetings and discussions with partners unable to attend their specific workshops. In the summer, we held our stage 1 strategy technical consultation using the online consultation room, and that was open to an expanded technical stakeholder list of over 110 contacts. Again, it should be noted that we also intend to engage further through stage 2 of the project, particularly following up with key organisations who are able to help us to address any outstanding information gaps. And the virtual consultation room is also planned to be used again at the end of stage 2 to publish the final strategy. This slide gives you an indication of the organisations we've received feedback from. We've reviewed over 400 comments from these partners. As you can see, we've had some pretty good success in engaging with the priority areas where previous gaps existed, including discussions with the water companies, relevant NHS organisations, the 100 Together team, and the County Council's local area energy plan team, who we're working in close collaboration with. There's also some key organisations we're still keen to receive feedback from to enhance the work, and we look to achieve this through stage 2 of the project. And just last one here, highlights from the extensive feedback we've received from the engagement. This includes strong support for the commitment to shaping infrastructure planning and delivery across Oxfordshire through the Oxford's work, suggestions to incorporate drivers of change in the strategy document to help future-proof its priorities and recommendations. There were wider suggestions recommended for existing and emerging evidence to be taken into consideration. There was a general support for the 6 strategic infrastructure areas and the subtopics, and the overall clarity and structure of the report. There was recognition of the challenges highlighted in planning infrastructure so far into the future, due to the uncertainty around the actual locations of growth beyond those that are actually set out in the local plans. There's also a lot of useful feedback on specific projects to add or remove from our project list and associated project details. And then there was lots of feedback on specific infrastructure topic areas or specific geographical locations or points where notable infrastructure issues were, or and recommendations provided. So my final slide is just to recap on the next steps. We're currently reflecting on our stakeholder feedback. We're updating our stage 1 deliverables, and we're focusing on this sifting process to reduce the project list to a more manageable size, alongside developing a prioritisation framework with the working group, which takes into consideration all the criteria that we want that to include. And we plan to complete by early next year, and we'll return to present our final strategy to you in March, I believe. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Before we move into discussion, can I say the recommendation is that we're noting progress. We've all had our opportunities to contribute to this process, and we will have more opportunities. I'm going to have zero tolerance on mention of specific bridges and bypasses. And if we can keep it top level, please. We're talking about, we're noting where we've got to so far and where we're going next. Who would like to ask a question or comment? Andy.
Yeah, a couple of comments and questions really. High level, no bridges, places. But one of the things that came across in the report was when you were mapping out the financial aspects of it over that 2050 period, and to give it any real credibility, because I accept the challenges are there's so many variables within it, is the phasing of the financial projections, because 2050 is a long way off, and it's quite hard to actually see the funding aspects of that with the figures you gave, because it's such a broad stroke of funding over such a big period of time. So I was wondering whether there would be any consideration given to seeing it as a phased financial breakdown in those projections to give it more credibility. Maybe something that you haven't thought of as yet, but I'm happy if that is worth commenting on. I think also another variable, first I'd like to congratulate you, by the way. It's an excellent piece of work, and it's the approach of joined up thinking by actually alluding to the various aspects that are really important to get a layered approach with infrastructure. I think is commendable. But I think one of the things I wanted to highlight is the concern over local plans, which stretch and straddle across different time frames. And it's so important that infrastructure is given prominence in a lot of local plans. And we want to make sure that the joined up thinking in this document plays its part in a credible way within the variables of local plans. And I wanted to know really what mechanism is really in place to ensure that that is going to be credible because of the variations of local plans and local plan deliveries, and making sure it's up to date. And the final point was just about the review mechanisms within the once the report is given. Can you actually also include how this is going to be reviewed? Because it's covering such a wide time frame, we need to actually be constantly reviewing, because things do change significantly. And it's just what process and mechanism will be put in place in the final report so that we can show that this isn't a document that's going to just sit on the shelf. It is an active document that has credibility because of the review and monitoring process.
Paul, I believe you want to come in.
Yeah, if I address those 3 points, and Matthew may wish to add, I think the first point about the financing and the potential phasing is a helpful suggestion, Councillor. So perhaps you'll allow me to take that back to the project working group and to talk to ACOM in detail about what that might look like. Your second point, I think, cuts to the nub of what a successful Oxis project would look like. If we get to this right, we will at the end of it have a short list of strategic infrastructure projects through which all of you are able to, in effect, sign up to as being a collective understanding of what the infrastructure development vision for Oxfordshire is to 2050. And I guess it's axiomatic in that each council will therefore want to be able to recognise its visions and ambitions in that list, and that will include their vision that they articulate through local plans or other relevant plans and strategies. And me saying it like that doesn't probably do justice to the scale of the challenge that's going to be, Councillor Graham, but that's what a successful Oxford should look like, and I hope we're able to get there. In terms of the review of the work, well, I think that's possibly a discussion that yourselves, chief executives and others might want to have in the future. Any piece of work like this is a point in time. There will, for example, be further work that will emerge through the work of the local area energy plans that could possibly inform Oxis. And so we have that kind of circular iteration as we build and refine our data set. So we no doubt will come back to talk about that again.
Okay. Anything you'd like to add to that, Matthew? Or
in terms of the third question, in terms of review mechanisms and how you keep this work live and up to date, it's a really important point. It comes up on lots of strategies and commissions like this. A big part of it is making sure that we hand over to you, not just a hard copy of a report and walk away. So part of what we hand back is a data set, both in terms of the projects, the baseline work that we've done, but also the mapping and the geodatabase that sits behind that means that can be interrogated and updated and used continually. The prioritization framework and the sifting work that we're coming up with at the moment is essentially a process that's being agreed by the working group that can be rerun once that framework works and is an agreement. Then if there are adjustments or tweaks to that project list as you update it in a year's time or whatever it is, you can use that prioritization framework again. So I wouldn't see it as a kind of a static point in time when this is finished in January. We should be handing over outputs which could be used as tools to update and keep this live.
anyone else? In which case, the recommendation is that we note the progress and the consultation closed. Yes. No, it's the next one, isn't it? But yep, we follow the progress as it goes, and you are coming back to us, as you said, that time. Everybody happy that we note that progress? Yeah. Well, we were supposed to be exhibiting vitality.
Yes,
agreed.
Yay.
Absolutely.
Item 7. Thanks, Matthew. Item 7 is Oxrail 2040. And I'm going to invite James Gagg, if you're available online.
Hello, thank you, Chair.
I
think Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent.
And
Okay,
we can see your presentation too.
excellent. Yeah, Kevin's going to move it through for ease of IT, I believe, which is great. Okay, hello. So I'm James Gagg. So I'm National Regional Team Leader at Oxfordshire County Council. In Robin's Directorate, we have a small rail team, and over the last few months, I've been working with consultants WSP to develop a new rail plan for Oxfordshire. And I'm going to give you a short overview of that. There is a short summary report, including links to the consultation documents. That consultation closed yesterday, and as a quick feedback, I believe we've got nearly 3,000 responses to that, so I think there's a lot of interest in rail across Oxfordshire. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to give an overview of the plan and go through a few slides on that, allow for any discussion or comments after that. So next slide, please. So the Oxrail 2040 plan for rail sets out the council's bold ambitions for the future of rail in Oxfordshire. Very much supports the objectives and aspirations of the local transport plan, and in particular wanting recognising rail's role in relation to supporting quality of life, protecting the environment, and driving sustainable economic growth. Next slide, please. So it's recognised that Oxfordshire sits at the heart in terms of rail terms of a number of rail or key rail corridors, Oxford being sort of the central part of that. So you've got the West Coast, sorry, the Great Western Main Line towards Bristol and South Wales. They've got Parkway. You've obviously got the lines into London, which also link the Reading down to the south coast. And then to the north, you've got the lines going towards Banbury in the Midlands, the North Cotswold line, which is a key of importance for those people living in the area, in particular West Oxfordshire. And then to the east, you've got new lines that are coming forward, in particular East-West Rail, and then you've got the Chiltern line as well, which is important for people in the east of Oxfordshire in terms of access around Bicester and Tame area in particular. So yeah, we recognise that Oxfordshire overall is rural, but it does have a dynamic economy, and there's a lot happening in that space. There's a lot of innovation and businesses in relation to that, and areas of innovation that need to be supported. And there are obviously key towns that are linked to the rail network within the central and of area, including Banbury, Didcot and Oxford. So yes, the rail network is key to supporting and connecting these communities, and also linking to wider communities through interchange and sustainable transport links from key rail hubs as well. And then the map on the right gives you an idea of where populations are growing around the rail network across Oxfordshire. So next slide, please. So in terms of growth, and we just heard from in terms of the OXIS work, looking at mapping growth and forecasts and understanding the infrastructure needs, and rail is part of that in terms of linking with that growth. But you'll see from this map there's a lot of development sites, particularly new houses coming forward. Again, a lot of it in proximity to rail lines and stations across Oxfordshire. We also have some nationally significant infrastructure projects, four in total, several of which have linkages or could be linked to the rail line, or are directly related to rail projects, in the case of East-West Rail and the proposed strategic rail freight interchange in the Ardleigh area, Hayford area. And clearly, recently there's been announcement of a shortlist of new towns, one of those being at Hayford, which is shown on the site. It's currently a planning application that is being considered in terms of up to 9,000 homes there potential, and the question is around also whether that would need improvements to rail to support that. And I think overall, in terms of development, obviously rail will support housing and employment growth. Next slide, please. So the Osrail 2040 has an overall vision for the railway to be a key part, as it says there, of a world-class integrated, accessible, sustainable transport network, and identifies some core themes within that. Improving connectivity, enhancing infrastructure. So that's about saying, well, these are the rail services, infrastructure improvements and changes needed to the overall network. We need to support climate action. How can rail operations be net zero, and also adaptation in relation to climate change is important in relation to the rail network, things like flooding and how do we deal with that going forward, for example. And importantly, rail supporting the wider place shaping improvements, and communities and links to that, and how we could support, for example, regeneration around key stations. So, and then on the right, there's some outcomes of what we want to achieve in terms of what we want to achieve from the railway, including supporting economy net zero, and shifting people from other transport options to more sort of sustainable travel as well, as per sort of wider LTCP and other objectives. Next slide, please. So there's again another couple of diagrams from our consultation draft. The one on the left just setting out the likely growth in housing and jobs at different locations close to the rail network, and the aspirations in terms of improvements and how that could support linkages as part of that. And to the right, we've got the outline rail service and frequency diagram and how we want to improve that over the next few years to 2040. We will be reviewing that in more detail in the context of all the responses we have received for the plan to see whether there need to be any tweaks or changes to that. But it does give you an overview of what we're trying to aspire to in terms of rail services overall, including potential new stations, which I'll say something about in a minute. Next slide, please. So, yeah, in terms of key priorities that we've identified in the plan, we have Oxford Station, because that is key from a not only the actual station itself in terms of dealing with growth in terms of numbers of passengers. It is already the busiest station in Oxfordshire, but there's like to be different growth there with things like East Rail, so new services coming in as well. So yeah, it's important that it supports both the wider station and the regeneration, but also the infrastructure improvements needed at the station, the vicinity of the station that are ongoing, as I think a lot of people will know about from visiting Oxford recently. Will be important to enable those wider rail improvements across the county. The second priority identified is that we want to move towards an electrified railway, both to support passenger rail but also freight, and that's important in the context of shifting freight from road to rail and dealing with sort of wider problems around congestion, HGV impacts, etc. For example, in relation to the A34. We have identified the concept of an Oxfordshire Metro, so that's how do we produce an integrated support, an integrated transport network, including linking with bus, active travel in particular at key stations, and looking at the principles around how we want to develop that, for example, in relation to integrated ticketing offers and things like that. And we've also identified a number of new stations that we think are important to support growth and new development coming forward, as well as obviously existing communities in those areas. So that's the Cowley branch line and the two stations there, Bedford to the north of Oxford, Wantage and Grove in South Oxfordshire, potentially Ardley in the vicinity of what's happening in the Hayford area. Next slide, please. So again, in the plan, we've tried to set out what we think the key deliverables are over the next few years, both in the short, medium and longer term. I won't read those out here, they're all in the plan, but the first bit is really identifying those things that are happening or being progressed. And you have things like East West Rail, and the second, the second, third and fourth areas identify key things in relation to Oxfordshire we want to further progress against the key themes within the plan. Next slide, please. So, but it's recognised if we are to achieve our vision for rail, we do need to work collaboratively with a lot of different partners. So that's both the districts and planning authorities across the area, central government, and the rail industry, as well as the private sector, for example, developers, and also key institutions across Oxfordshire, such as the university, hospitals, and others, and communities. We have good working relationships with the Community Rail Partnership, for example, and how we can support their plans for engaging and developing community access to the railway as well. And then there's some development opportunities directly around key stations, and how can we work with others to progress those as well. The picture is of a hybrid, what we call Class 99 freight locomotive, which is now being delivered over the next as launched and been delivered. So that helps in terms of the decarbonisation aspirations for freight as well as passenger. Next slide, please. And I think I just want to recognise, I think I said this earlier, that Oxfordshire is quite a rural community, and so we recognise that need to be high quality links, in particular from stations across the rail network in Oxfordshire to those areas that are not directly connected to the rail network. So we do need to work to improve that, particularly, I guess, bus access to stations are important, as well as active travel, and develop that through the Oxfordshire Metro concept over the next time periods, and see how we can improve that to ensure that rail is part of an integrated transport network across Oxfordshire. It does need to be seen in that context. Next slide, please. Just to say a couple of things around rolling stock, as we call it, but new trains. Train services are no good if you don't have high quality trains that people can use. I talked about freight trains, this in terms of passenger trains, and there's been some good news recently in terms of rail investment across Oxfordshire. Children Railways has secured some new rolling stock, which has been taken from north of the country, and that will improve the Marylebone Banbury Moor Street services that link in with, for example, Hampton Tame and Bicester North. So they'll be rolled across the network. That has also implications and benefits for wider children's services, because it means existing trains can be used for other services, such as to Oxford, and which is good news, extra capacity for more passengers. Also cross country, recognising that some of their fleet is quite old. There's been money to refurbish a number of their, or all of their rolling stock, which does mean that they can run high quality services, seating, access to electronics, etc., and also run longer services as well between certain locations. Key service obviously in Oxfordshire is between Oxford and Banbury, and we're pressing to look at reinstatement of additional cross-country services on Reading Newcastle route, which would serve Oxfordshire between those two locations in particular. Next slide, please. We're also working closely with Great Western Railway on what they're calling their Green Railway for Growth plans, and they're developing a business case effectively to replace a lot of their diesel trains with battery electric trains, which could draw power from overhead electrics where they're available, and then use batteries to extend their services into Oxfordshire where there isn't overhead electrics at the moment, although obviously we are keen to progress that for the medium term as per the plan, and really supporting on the business case for that with government, which would transform train services on some of their routes, and it's looked likely with the shift to Great British Railways that they will bring in Chilterns and potentially other operators into those plans as well. But quite exciting really to see those plans go forward, and they've been doing a lot of work on customer engagement and understanding needs to support those plans and how trains should be designed, as well as obviously the core case for why trains should come in and replace existing trains in terms of efficiency and effectiveness as well. Next slide, please. And we heard briefly, or we heard earlier, about plans for devolution. This does give an opportunity, if the Mayor for Thames Valley goes forward, to engage and get directly involved in rail matters. Mayors across the country have worked on rail and directly invested in rail and actually operated services as well. And I think government is keen for mayoral authorities to get involved and specify and understand the rail needs for their areas and get directly involved in investment in the rail network in different ways. And again, as I say, different mayoral authorities already existing have done that in different ways across the country, and I think the government is keen to test the appetite for different mayoral authorities and their input to the rail networks as a real opportunity in this area, in that space. In the shorter term, we would like to, as an Oxford perspective, develop a new enhanced rail partnership to try and build and move that forward. Yeah, and that would build on obviously all our existing work with Network Rail and rail passenger operators as change happens, both at local government, but also in the rail industry, and how we can build on that and work collaboratively and positively together. Next slide. This is my last slide. I think as stated at the first, we had a public consultation on the rail plan documents from the 3rd of September to yesterday. As I say, we seem to have got up to nearly 3,000 responses, and I know a lot of detailed responses from a lot of partners, such as district councils, that we will need to work through as we produce the final rail plan, which is due to come to County Council Cabinet for consideration on the 18th of November. I think that is it from me in terms of an overview. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. If I can draw your attention to the recommendations, which is raise any queries on the consultation document and identify key points that we wish to feedback. So, Andy, first.
Thank you very much. Thank you, James, for the presentation. We appreciate it's a very important piece of work, the Oxford Rail 2040 plan, and we're grateful as a council, West Oxfordshire, to input through the consultation. And we support the overarching vision and strategic themes, particularly the emphasis on improving connectivity, supporting climate change and climate action, and recognising rail's role in shaping places and underpinning growth. I'm not quite sure if you mentioned that, but if it isn't, I'm sure it is implicit, but I think it would be great if it was explicit. However, one of its focus appears to be is on enhancing existing infrastructure and services in areas already relatively well served. In West Oxfordshire, the key future growth corridor runs from Carterton through Witney, Ensham and the Saltcross Garden Village to Oxford. And this corridor is not well served by rail. We have responded with the date through the consultation, asking the County Council to strengthen references to the potential Carterton Witney Oxford Rail corridor in the Ox Rail 2040 plan, so that the plan better reflects the background work already carried out by both the county and district councils, and supports the emerging West Oxfordshire local plan, which actually extends now, which is just about to go public, really, in the sense that we've agreed that it goes to 2043, and that might need to be taken into account. and this will safeguard the strategic land corridor for a potential rail or mass transit solution. So I kind of think it's just important to underpin that, because the whole point of rail and a rail strategy is that it actually works in harmony with local plans. It actually really makes the case, particularly currently when we have to provide so many more houses and homes in areas, that we actually ensure that it does form just a layer and not is silo driven. And I kind of think the Oxis document, when we're looking at infrastructure strategy, tended to look at this holistic approach. And I just hope when the final report goes to Cabinet, will actually demonstrate some of the points I've made, because we want to continue working with the County Council in a positive way. We're continuing that dialogue. So overarchingly, we do support the aims behind it, but there is some work still to be done.
I can ask David to ask his question, and then we'll...
Yeah, it's a couple of the key points. I mean, to agree on the points that have been raised already about the importance of connectivity to the railway network. Obviously, a lot of people in Oxfordshire live some considerable distance from train stations, so how to get those people from where they are to the train station in the shortest possible and preferably the most environmentally friendly possible way, that's going to be a really key component. So I'm glad it's being thought about. The main point I wish to make was to do with Hayford Park, because you mentioned that in the presentation. Obviously, just this weekend, the government announced its potential 12 new towns, of which Hayford Park in Cherwell in Oxfordshire is one of those. And so that's going to be a considerable new number of households, considerable population there. Will be crying out for a rail station, access to the railways. So to talk about potentially there being a train station Ardley or in that area, I think that potentially needs to be, almost definitely, we need to be really thinking about how we can connect Hayford Park in the future as the government moves forward with those proposals, assuming it does continue to move forward with those proposals, which is sort of concentration of population in that area. Sufficiently far from other places like visitors would warrant serious consideration into how that can access the train network with a new station. So that would be the main points I would think about this week, based on that new development.
Shall I ask James if he wants to come back on any of those, and then I'll go to Liz. James?
Hello. Yes, Robin might want to say a couple of words sort of more widely anyway. I think in terms of the Whitney link, the rail plan, I suppose, recognises the aspirations for delivery of rail link in the future. Obviously, there was previous work undertaken, which the county supported. It did identify that the link would have a very high cost. I think it was 900 million plus, based on the estimates at the time, and that there will need to be sort of considerable work needed to develop the proposal further, as well as understand in more detail the wider implications on the existing and rail network, and also the rail network that would be enabled should rail improvements go forward across Oxfordshire as well. The plan has set out, and clearly very useful that West Oxford should come back alongside other partners in terms of detailed comments, which we'll have to go through to consider in relation to the plan and potential changes to the plan prior to adoption. But it does set out that options to improve public transport along the A40, given the planned growth and the continued need to service the settlements between Whitney and Carterton, does need to be reviewed, looking at mass transit options, including rail as one of those options, looking at the timing, delivery, funding, and realism of being able to deliver that as well in the context of the local plan and those proposals. I suppose the other thing to note from terms of wider improvements, it does make clear that we want to continue to work with the rail industry to develop the North Cotswold line. We have a partnership called the Cotswold Line Partnership, working with others such as Worcestershire. I know Worcestershire is one of the new town proposals as well, actually identified, so that's interesting to note. In terms of improvements on the North Cotswold Line, with particular focus on improving rail hubs and access to those rail hubs from a sustainable transport perspective at Hamborough and Charlbury, supported by improved frequency of rail services, particularly at Hamborough, again enabled through infrastructure improvements as well. Do you want me to say something on Hayford? There was another question on Hayford, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, you did mention it in your presentation, didn't you? Only if there's something to add. If not, I'll go to Liz and then Roger.
I was going to say on Hayford, actually, I've just, before coming into this meeting, we had an England's Economic Heartland meeting. I'll comment a bit further on that later on in the agenda, but to say that actually the whole question of new towns and rail connectivity to those new towns was brought up in that meeting. So I think it's something that we can work on with EEH and with other people who've got the same question. You know, how are these big new developments going to be able to connect to sustainable transport methods? And I think it's really important that we have that discussion broadly as well as within the county. So yeah, totally supportive of the idea that we have a functioning station there at Hayford. And just to say on the subject of the Whitney to Oxford line, I think it's really important that we look at this as our purpose here is to make sure that people have a means of being able to get to sustainable transport, whatever that looks like. You know, it could be a tram, it could be a rail line. My concern, as James said, is that, you know, we're looking at a very large amount of money to build an actual train line, and the connection into Oxford is complex. And there may be other solutions that we can bring forward in the short to medium term, which would allow people to travel more sustainably.
Robin, did you want to add?
Only to just give some comfort that, yeah, very happy to look at that wording in the context of the revisions to the local plan proposals, and then some comfort on kind of action. We are doing work to look at financing mechanisms for transport on that corridor, and the works that James referred to and the schemes that we are supporting elsewhere on the network are essential to opening up Whitney Rail. If that is a possibility, so expansion of Oxford station capacity is critical. Electrification, increasing rolling stock are all needed if we were going to get to Whitney.
Okay, as to note and to identify key points, I think we've identified some key points there. Is everybody happy with that? Steve? Yes. Thank you, James. We'll move on to next item, which is the forward plan. Item 8. Kevin, is there anything you would like to draw our attention to?
Excuse me, nothing that isn't covered.
I note that we're getting the Growth Commission coming back to our next meeting, which we're looking forward to. Any other questions on the forward plan? Yes, we'll move to, and I'm switching these items around. Item 10 we'll take first, which is updates from strategic partners. So I've got a few of those on my list. So EEH is the first one. Liz, there's a meeting running parallel to this one, which I wasn't expecting to report from, but there was one before that.
Well, the main thing to report, actually, which is very good news, is that although the government has said they're not going to be funding STB street transport boards in the future, the one that they are going to continue to fund is EEH. Right. And I think that's testimony to the very good work that's been done by the team there. I know James, who's just left the meeting, was actually seconded to EEH recently and has just come back from that secondment. But we've done a lot of work on, well, obviously on East West Rail, but largely around the sort of East West Rail legacy and how everything that we've been talking about just now, you know, how we can connect people to East West Rail sustainably without them having to take their cars to the station, etc. A lot of work being done on, for instance, the Oxford to Swindon to Bristol line, which would open up the opportunity for Wantage and Grove. So all of that is work that EH has been doing, and I'm really pleased to say that that's the one STB that is going to continue to exist, which is great. And the new chair was elected today. That's Adam Zerny. He is the leader in Central Bedfordshire, and Steve Broadbent, who is the leader in Buckinghamshire, is now the vice chair. And I think between those, Steve's been very involved with the East West Rail Partnership. I think between them they'll carry on the very good work that the team have been doing at EH. So that's my main report, which I think is quite positive news.
Thank you. And does that mean that you now drop off the?
I will still be on the board as the representative for the county council, strategic authority. But the other thing to say, by the way, is that the other thing that we're going to set up is a subgroup of EH to think about what the future remit of EH should be in the context of the corridor. There's a lot of work going on with the supercluster and the university group across the Oxford-Cambridge corridor, but it's really important that elected leaders have a voice in that discussion. So I think a subgroup's being set up to then bring back to the next meeting, which I will be attending, and I think you'll be attending too, David, to talk about the, I think you're representative, I can't remember.
No, Beth here is
Beth here is now. Beth here will be coming to that meeting, fine. And that's to talk about, and we talk about, you know, what our future strategy as EH will be in relation to the corridor.
Any questions on EH? My next one is Local Nature Partnership. David.
Yes, that'll be me. I went to my first meeting as our representative on that partnership recently. I mean, the main thing that was feedback from that is about the local nature recovery strategy, which I think we're familiar with. That's close to completion now. Just to report that will be launched on the 12th of November as part of the partnership's annual forum. That's going to take place at the Natural History Museum in Oxford. I understand that leaders wish to attend and haven't said they can go yet. Still will be space available for leaders if they wanted to.
You. And the other one is the Inclusive Economy Partnership. Kevin, did you have
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a few words from Emma Coles, the RIP manager, just to say that following the granting of funding that you made at the previous meeting, she is moving ahead with recruiting the Anchor Network Manager. That's what the growth deal funding is for. And so she wanted to highlight that, and to highlight that the partnership's putting on a social value procurement, I think, something on 19th of November.
If anyone has questions about that, I won't ask Kelly to field them, but if you'd like to send them in, we'll forward that on. I think that's all our strategic partnerships. If anybody, unless anyone's got any others, in which case we'll move on to other updates, which is item 9, other updates relevant to the committee. I'm going to ask Suzanne to give an update on the Southern Vale Joint Local Plan.
Yes, so you may be aware that we issued a public statement yesterday setting out that the planning inspectors of our joint local plan have recommended that we withdraw the plan from examination process. This is over one single issue, which is the duty to cooperate. And you'll be aware that a number of increasing number of emerging local plans around the country are being recommended for withdrawal for that particular issue. Obviously this news is very fresh to us, but we're in discussions about the next steps, and we'll provide an update to this committee at future meetings.
Andy?
Yeah, just on the duty to cooperate, really, I think it's an important point because it's been raised in a lot of places, really, and that certainly we at West actually take that very seriously. And that is part and parcel of our consultation process. But just as I've alluded to before, the local plan can now be extended to 2043 in West Oxfordshire. That means it's covering probably a 17-year period as opposed to the 15, because we think that we need to actually understand what our home's growth is going to be. And we need to actually plan for it in in a way in which we can also have supporting infrastructure there to underpin it. So I kind of think I've sort of empathise with the point you've made, but actually just wanted to inform everyone around the table officially that that is the case in terms of the West's position, taking the local plan process forward.
Thank you. Susan.
I'm not going to comment on the local plan, don't worry. No, I just wanted to draw people's attention to what has been a very, very serious incident in Manchester, which people may not have seen happen during the course of this meeting. There's been a very horrific sounding incident at a synagogue. There have been several deaths. I just thought it would be appropriate, while we are all here together, gathered as leaders in local government in Oxfordshire, to send a message of sympathy and support to our colleagues who will be dealing with some very difficult circumstances in Manchester, and also to the Jewish community in Oxfordshire, who I suspect during Yom Kippur in particular are feeling, well, very vulnerable at the moment.
Thank you. I hadn't known Max having followed, but thank you for raising it. Is there any other items we brought forward? In which case, the final item is the date of the next meeting, which is the 25th of November, and we're back to our normal time of 2 o'clock. That's here. Okay, thank you. I had a gavel, I would bang it.
We'll get you one.
Are we broadcast?